Welcome for our discussion about the artificial intelligence. Special welcome to Professor Mark Coeckelbergh, who is so nice to discuss with me the questions of artificial intelligence, specifically, of course, the influence of artificial intelligence on democracy. Mm-hmm. His latest book, I think it's the latest book, is called Why Artificial Intelligence Undermines Democracy, with an addition, and what to do about it. So maybe I may ask you, why do you deal with artificial intelligence as a philosopher? You're a professor for philosophy. Yes. Is it a philosophical question, not only a technical question or technological question?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good opportunity for a philosopher to ask questions because it's a technology that, like robotics and other automation technologies, that does some tasks that humans usually do, and that raises all kind of questions about responsibility, all kind of ethical questions also. So I started with that. Also interesting questions about moral standing, like what does it mean if these technologies give the appearance of being human-like? Should we treat them differently than, let's say, a chair or a glass of water? And so I really use it as an opportunity also to ask philosophical questions and to connect with philosophical tradition.
Maybe could you give just a brief definition for our audience? What is artificial intelligence for you? How would you define it?
Yeah, it's itself a very controversial question in the field of AI ethics. But for me, it's of course, first of all, it's a technical thing. It has to do with algorithms, but also with data, with the infrastructure needed for it, like cloud infrastructure. But for me, it's also next to a technical thing, it's also connected to human narratives and to human meaning making. If you look at the discussion about artificial intelligence, it's not only about technology, but it's also about what is the future of humanity? What is our common future with technology, and more generally, what is the human in the end also? So I think it's it is technology, but it's also really about us humans, and that makes it very interesting, I think.
When we speak about artificial intelligence, many authors have speculation about the future. So it's not something which is already fixed and at the end of a development. Some hope, some fear that we go in the direction of super intelligence, intelligence which is clever or more intelligent as humans, or maybe as the humankind as such. Mm-hmm. What's your opinion? What's your fear, anxiety, or your hope?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not surprised that people project their hopes and fears in this technology, given that it is also this narrative and cultural thing. And for me, it's my opinion on superintelligence is that this is really a distraction from the more urgent ethical and political problems that we face. I think it's a fantasy kind of narrative. It's a hope, perhaps, that we have these super intelligent machines that can help us, but also then the fear that they take over. But I think what's really wrong with that is not so much that there are no technical possibilities to make things more intelligent, but more that it makes it seem as if AI is this separate thing, thing on its own. Whereas in fact, humans are involved all the time. Humans develop it, humans train it, humans also use it and make decisions about it, where to use it, how to use it. So for me, it kind of is a way to also evade the question of human responsibility for technologies. And that's something that I very much stress also in the light, politically, for example, in the light of the work of Hannah Arendt, and morally speaking, in the light of what many existentialist philosophers have argued, that we should take responsibility for ourselves and not blame or rely on something outside us. And I'm afraid that with AI, that's exactly what people try to do, to rely on something outside themselves and have this fantasy that all these things are going to happen so that they don't have to do what's good and what's right.
So I am a bit critical of the attitude or the thesis of Yuval Harari, the Israeli historian, who says it's the end of human history, or specifically the human-dominated history, because we have a second agent now beside the human being who may determine also what is going on in the history.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good that that one reflects on what is different today as opposed to previous times. I do think that these kind of technologies are different from, say, hammers or industrial technologies, technologies that are used in a factory. This is really technology that comes much closer to us in the sense that it takes over now even tasks such as writing, creative tasks. So that's something that we have to theorize. But I disagree with Harari that it's a fundamentally different era that's starting. I think that it's really up to us what place we give this technology, and that it's possible to meaningfully embed this in human society and culture without, handing us over to the machines.
So let's go a bit more in the detail. The consequences also for democracy. Many experts, sociologists and others discussed already the situation that people are more and more isolated. They are using social media and think they are in communication, but in fact, it's a very, directed and very isolated communication with some people somewhere, but not nearby. It's not the question of democracy. So you say yourself in your book, isolation kills. So could you a bit elaborate how you see that kind of isolation and how it is enhanced and promoted by artificial intelligence?
Yes, I think that isolation is not only a problem that comes along now with artificial intelligence, but that has deeper roots, in particular in modernity. Modernity, we have loosened the ties to tradition, loosened the ties to family, also to social structures that before gave more meaning to our lives. And this had a very much a liberating effect, and I think it's great that there was enlightenment and so on. But it also had disadvantages, and one of them is that we do feel more lonely, isolated, and so on. And technology, like some kind of robotics, but also AI in the form of chatbots, can be seen as an answer to that problem in modernity, saying that, well, you feel lonely, we give you this robot, we give this chatbot, and so you have an artificial friend, artificial partner, and so on. But of course, this doesn't really solve the problem, because it offers an imitation of emotion, an imitation of relationship that cannot replace the real thing, that cannot really answer to our real human needs. So I think we have to watch out for kind of techno-solutionism, where technology is always presented as a problem, as a solution for all our social and political problems. So that's what's happening here, I think. And so it doesn't mean that we should reject these technologies, but we shouldn't have them replace real human relationships. We should have them support them rather than replace.
How can we do it? How should we do it? What's the role of education in this? Because some say the worst thing is that when people don't even feel that they lost something, when they lost empathy and they lost the social relationships, so how can we work against it?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I think we should support people having this kind of experiences, and also support a kind of learning process where we give people the abilities to engage in social relationships. And I think that's a problem when we have technologies that make it seem like these relationships are a matter of just having a kind of assistant who's always friendly and supportive and so on. I think that kind of relationship is more closer to having a servant, having a slave, having someone to control. And I think that's a very toxic kind of relationship. It's a, politically speaking, a relationship of dominance. And instead, we should have, try to have better quality, free relationships with other people. But this is something that you cannot have a technological fix for it. I think it has to be learned. It has to be learned in the family. It has to be learned at schools. Next to that, I think it's also important that we train people to integrate these technologies in a good way in their lives, so that the technology is not something that they fully depend on, but that they have some agency, some autonomy to decide how they're going to use it, and to see these technologies as aids and as empowering, rather than something, a new kind of drug, and something that people get addicted to.
Let's go to the second element you also touch in your book, is about the trust. Democracy depends also very much how far people trust the leaders, the politicians, the system as such. Now, I read that there is a survey done in 2025 where people say they trust more a chatbot answer than an answer of politicians. Anyway, trust, or the lack of trust, is a big issue for the survival of democracy. How do you see, can it be used also, artificial intelligence, to enhance trust, or how do you see the relationship general of trust and democracy?
Yes. Yeah, so for democracy, trust is needed. Trust in politics, but also trust among people. And that gets us back to Hannah Arendt, who not only pointed to the isolation, but also to the lack of trust that there was as a kind of soil for Nazi politics. And so what is important is to strengthen then the trust between people. Now, what happens with these new technologies, in particular now AI used in combination with social media, is that there's the risk of creating an environment where people are encouraged to distrust each other, where there's a lot of polarization, division, and where there is also a distrust in terms of the information that we get. So AI enables the creation of misinformation, disinformation, enables fake news, for example, fake videos. And so the result of that is that the line between what's real, what's not real, what's true, what's not true, becomes blurred for people. So people don't know anymore where that line is. And again, according to the same analysis of Arendt, that's dangerous, because then in such a climate, people are more open to manipulation, for example, political manipulation with propaganda. And in contrast to earlier times, the propaganda is not via a mass medium, the same message for everyone, but the message is tailored to the specific person. Because with AI we can make profiles, analyze these profiles, and on the basis of that give people very tailored messages. So it's much more effective, much more politically dangerous also in some cases.
Are there measures to prevent that kind of dissemination of fake news or undemocratic or anti-democratic attitudes? People speak about filters which should be put into the machines or the artificial intelligence systems in order to safeguard also some democratic values. Is it really possible to do that?
I think it's only possible to a certain extent, because it's a kind of like an arms race, right? So you have software that can detect fake news, fake videos, for example. But at the same time, the software to create those videos gets always better in getting through these filters. So I think it's in the end a race that's hard to win. What one can try to do is to have more forms of basically also censorship where humans are involved. But with censorships, we have to watch out a lot because there we have to have a balance between that and keeping freedom and respecting the human rights. So I think that there is really a danger today that we go too much to the side of that censorship, that we say like, oh, we want to do something about these social media problems, but that both the platforms like X and the government is too much tempted to restrict freedom of expression. So there's really this kind of balance to take there, protecting democracy, but still, meaning you want extreme voices to be suppressed. On the other hand, one needs some tolerance also, according to the liberal democratic principles. So this is very difficult political exercise actually to make nowadays.
The European Union did try in its Artificial Intelligence Act to have some basic regulation also concerning the question of values and violation of some basic values and principles. On the other hand, some people say, well, then you stop the development. We are anyway way back in the relationship to the United States or to China. So what can we do? Can the public institution, governments, European Union can influence that kind of development in the sense of the basis or the balance, what you said, or are we failed? And
I think that's a very hard and sensitive topic in a way. I talked also about it earlier this week in the Belgian Parliament. I think it's a huge challenge for Europe in general to increase innovation. I think we really have a problem there. We're very good in regulation. We're very good in thinking about the ethics and all that. But there is US, there is China, and so on. And so, how do we respond to that? I mean, I'm a bit critical of always playing the card of the sort of competition narrative, and I think it's good that we have the regulation, and we shouldn't give up on our ethical values. I think also not on our democratic principles. However, we have to see like what is it possible to create a framework within which innovation is easier and more supported? Do we invest not enough, or do we invest in the wrong way? So we really have to deal with this question. What I find personally about regulation currently in Europe is that I'm very pro-regulation. I also was in a high-level expert group on AI for European Commission, and I sort of helped to lay the ethical basis for the AI Act. But there's not only the AI Act, there's lots of different legal instruments. And I think it's very difficult for organizations, companies, citizens to still see the forest through the trees, as we say in my language. So there is a need for convergence, for making things more simple and easy to comply with, I think.
would it be useful, if difficult, to have an international regulator body organized perhaps by the United Nations to have some principle filter, so to say, against building the bomb, against advice to how to attack your neighbor or a neighboring country, how to spread a virus, a dangerous virus, to have at least some principal elements of what should not be done?
I absolutely agree with you. I think we need some minimal rules at a global level for dealing with AI, for dealing with the problems of war and peace. I think it's very needed. Unfortunately, we have a climate nowadays where national sovereignty is very much emphasized at the expense of international cooperation. But I think ultimately dealing with global problems such as climate change, some problems with AI, wars and so on, we absolutely need more rather than less cooperation globally. And I personally believe that for AI we need a kind of global governance framework for that. I think when I say this, people say that you're a dreamer and this, but I think we as academics, intellectuals and so on, we have a duty to try to imagine that world of increased cooperation and also some form of supranational agent that can bring countries to, that put limits to the unbridled power seeking and warmongering that we have now.
Eric Schmidt and Andrew Sorota. Eric Schmidt was a former CEO of Google. Wrote recently an article in the international edition of the New York Times, use AI to reinvigorate democracy, not replace it. And they write, every month that democracies remain dysfunctional while artificial intelligence capabilities improve, algocracy becomes more appealing. So this algocracy, they want to fight against it, again with artificial intelligence, for example, organize better information of the citizens about legislation, about activities, organize meetings via artificial intelligence. So can artificial intelligence also be used as an instrument for democratic development and bring new ideas in the political debate?
Absolutely. So I think it's a bad idea if it means technocracy, if it means a more authoritarian form of rule where technology takes over, or where some, the few use technology to rule the many. That's of course a temptation since Plato. But I think that AI can be used in very specific ways. For example, to support deliberation, where people give information, support consensus seeking. There's more and more technologies that are developed to do that. So I think if the idea is to strengthen democracy, it could work as a tool to help people. Also at the global level, in global cities, I think we need, given the diversity in terms of language and backgrounds, I think we absolutely need also tools to translate and try to bridge some cultural differences. So I do think that AI can play a role there. But then we have to really, as I call it in my book, to develop AI for democracy. Rather than just uncritically accepting developments that undermine it.
You also write in your book, the citation, the development of democratic artificial intelligence needs to be embedded in an equitable, inclusive, and fair participation process. How do you imagine that participation process? If I look into watch different debates on YouTube or wherever about artificial intelligence, it's very difficult even to understand what it is for somebody who is dealing with this issue at some time. So how can ordinary citizens be involved in that whole process of democratization of artificial intelligence?
Yeah. I think at the moment, what's missing in the picture is that ordinary citizens need more education about the role technologies play in our society. Now there are sufficient plans about AI literacy to know how to use the technology in school, in your profession, and so on. But this is not what I mean. What I mean is really to have also a bit reflection on technology, what it does to our lives, what it does to society. So that then on this basis, people are more informed and better able to have this democratic discussion about their technological future. But if these conditions are fulfilled, then I think we can have a better quality debate and a debate where also AI can help. For example, we don't always have the time to read all the newspapers or all the news is there. We don't have maybe time to inform ourselves of particular topics. And AI is very good in summarizing, in the form of LLMs, is very good in summarizing some basic information for us. So I think it can help people to engage more in these debates.
Maybe in this connection, I can come back to an issue we already discussed when we discussed the question of isolation. You put a lot of emphasis on the community in your book, which is in a way contradictory to what we see. Yeah. Why is community for democracy so important for you?
Yeah, I think that community used to be understood as something traditional, something that is there, and that with modernity, then that kind of community, I think, has vanished or is at least not there anymore like it used to be. And so community seems something of the past and something that we don't need anymore. But I think human beings to some extent need community. Only I think if we don't want some kind of more reactionary form of community, we need to actually create the community anew, sort of reinvent community with respect for human freedom and autonomy. So to get that balance right, I think is generally a problem in modernity. But for democracy, it's very important because when you have community, it means you share some experiences and you share some space also where you can talk with others, where you can meet others. And I think that, for me, is more conform democracy as not so much as a form of state or form of rule, but more as a form of life. Something that that is not something that you do only every few years when you go to vote, but something that you do as a natural matter, also at work, in family, in local community. And I think that connection between community and democracy, that could really help us to have a richer form of democracy. Instead of just voting, really have a more participative form of democracy. And I think it also goes beyond a more rationalistic conception, as Habermas is often interpreted, for example, where it's all about arguments and rational discourse. I think human beings are also social beings, are also emotional beings. So we should somehow integrate that in politics, but in a way that, of course, doesn't lead to the horrors of the 20th century. Yeah.
You spoke about sharing information and sharing the community values. The question is also about sharing the income and the wealth created by artificial intelligence, at least when we think or when we suppose that it's not overhyped and the hype will go on. Recently there was a discussion between Dr. Fei Li, one of the experts, a Chinese immigrant to the United States. One can see how immigrants to the United States benefit the United States. And Eric Schmidt and Dr. Fei Li said, well, we have to share the income in some way. Eric Schmidt said, well, in democracy, we cannot redistribute the income. We have just to grow the whole cake, and then everybody will be happy afterwards. So what's your opinion? How can we deal this issue that probably, for some companies at least, of artificial intelligence, there will be a huge income rise?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's really a problem that the power and wealth distribution is very asymmetric at the moment. These few companies, they have a lot of money, they have a lot of power also. It's difficult for the democratic process to sort of like take some of that power back. And also we're like, when it comes about the question of redistribution, I think we're confronted here with two very different ways of thinking about that. The more American laissez-faire thinking, where Redistribution is not a task of the state, but it's something that voluntarily needs to happen by capitalists, right? By these techno-capitalists, and whereas we think that that it's too dangerous in Europe generally. We think it's too dangerous to leave that all to just the arbitrary will of a few tech people. So I think here in Europe we have the idea that the state should organize that, should organize to some extent, and there are of course very different opinions how to do it, to what extent there should be solidarity and so on. But generally, I think many European people agree that the state should play a significant role in that. So I think for Europe, we can try to redistribute some of the gains from artificial intelligence. But we are in this difficult situation that many of the most popular AI technologies are developed by big tech in the US, partly in China, and so we miss out a little bit on the big gains. So there's not much to distribute them, right? So we are in this difficult situation, a kind of also geopolitical situation that people talk about. Digital sovereignty. We can of course make laws and so on, but in the end, I think the problem also needs to be solved on the level of like, okay, what kind of technology do we want to develop in Europe, and that also probably needs a kind of change of mentality also, maybe also some ways to be proud of what we can do and have visions also ourselves about the technological future, rather than just buying those that come from abroad.
Come to that perhaps at the end. Before that, I want to still stick to the question of the redistribution. Mm-hmm. Even some responsible people in the IA community in the US think about how to manage this question of huge gains for some companies and maybe unemployment for many others, which could also be a danger for democracy, of course.
Absolutely.
And some say, well, let's have a universal basic income. Mm-hmm. Others say, oh, okay, let's have a universal basic capital in order to make all people, well, not all people, because only the citizens of the US thought about, not the immigrants, capitalist, which is even strange enough in a MAGA program supported also by Donald Trump. So is that in general a way, independently of artificial intelligence, that our society should think more about, realistically, about basic incomes or basic capital in times when we have at least to fear that many people will be unemployed and will be not benefiting at all from new technologies?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's worth thinking about different solutions than we have now. I don't think the classic welfare state of Europe is so bad or in redistributing if we don't completely dismantle it. So I think it's we should also consider strengthening that, or at least keep it as an option. But also something like basic income is worth trying. I'm a bit skeptical about this idea of everyone capitalist. It sounds a bit like the American dream or something, with like the capital, you can become a capitalist and then everything will be all right. But I think we should be open to reimagine these systems of distribution, and if it works better to do it in a different way, that's fine. I think we could maybe experiment also with some things. I'm very inspired sometimes by John Dewey, the American philosopher, where he says that politics and democracy is also partly, should be, just like in science, should be also partly a matter of experiment. Of course, not that everything is allowed, but rather in the sense that we should also try out things. We basically don't know what works and what doesn't work. And maybe on a small scale, for example, I mean, there have been some experiments, and I think this is an interesting direction to pursue.
maybe from my side at least, to come to some sort of a conclusion, we see a world, and let's take the more industrialized world for the moment, with the US, where the tech companies have a big influence, visible at the inauguration of Trump when they were all right in the back there. We have China, which is going that way very strongly with some authoritarian, but nevertheless seemingly some effective measures. We have Europe, where we have our culture, we are proud of it, but we lack that kind of innovative orientation which would bring us into the top of the technological development. And on the other hand, also our democracies are not so well established. If we look to some of the neighboring countries, Hungary, Slovakia, etc. Not speaking about all these countries which are included in the global south, beyond, of course, besides China, where we have a lack of investment because there is no affordability. They don't have the money, they don't have the energy, because energy is a big issue in the question of artificial intelligence. So how do you see Europe? How can we manage to keep some of our characteristics, our way of life, as you mentioned before, but still motivate people to go more into innovation, into risk-taking? Because many people complain the risk-avoiding attitude of, especially including the younger people.
Yeah, Europe is sometimes indeed playing it safe and looking to the past rather than to the future. I think this is something that also, again, can be partly addressed in education. But I think it would help, actually, coming back to what we just talked about, to give people more a feeling of basic social security. And if you have a sort of feeling of basic social security, you might be more willing to take risks, because you might feel, okay, I'm not going to be on the street if I try this or that. So I think it's also like about shaping a framework around this that encourages people, that brings out more the creative and playful aspects there, while giving sort of background of safety. I think many young people today feel very insecure and unsafe in an environment that is there now. Both economically and in other ways. So I think if we do something about that, we can create maybe conditions for a more risk-oriented psychology.
Do you use yourself artificial intelligence, and in what way?
Yeah, I sometimes use it to look up things for my research. I think it's a very good tool to quickly get an overview of something that you don't know much about. And I use it only as a first step and not as a tool to write. But I think it can be useful. It also reminds me that, for me, because being educated in a way when there was no such thing as AI, I have, of course, also background to be a bit more critical of some of the things that come out of that. So I think that brings us back to the point of education. But yeah, I do use it. I think it's possible to, if you keep that critical attitude, to use it in a way that supports work and supports even thinking. So yeah.
And your students?
Oh yeah, they use it for sure. Some with more thinking, some with less thinking.
Do you notice it, or is it?
Yeah, I do notice it. I notice in the sense that some papers are really very low quality. And my way of dealing with that is not so much to police them in a sense of trying to find out, did you use it or not? I think it's a very difficult question, because everyone uses it to some extent. And it's also not a kind of role as an educator that I want to take. But I do look at the end result, and if the end result is bad quality, whether it's done due to ChatGPT or due to the person, then it's bad, and then it's my task to try to get people to deliver better work. But I think it's a huge challenge in education, also higher education, to deal with this, how to use these technologies in a constructive way, in a critical way, in a way that doesn't push that quality down.
So that would mean that our education system would have a lot to do in order to go in that direction and change the educational system and the way they educate and they teach in order to have it included, but not as a substitute, but as an additional instrument.
Yes, to know how to critically use it. So I think there the system of higher education, for example, needs definitely more resources to deal with that, because we in the daily life we don't always have time for that. But I think it's very important there to also teach the teachers, because often the teachers also don't know it, or they do not use it sufficiently critical. So I think it's really important to teach the teachers and then train students both in the very classic humanistic skills of writing and thinking without these technologies, and in using these technologies to support reflection, to support good thinking.
So, Professor Coeckelbergh, thank you very much. Unless you want to add something or raise an issue.
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for this talk and this very interesting subject you raised and issues you raised. And again, this book I can only advise and all our audience to buy it and to read it, of course. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.